You're watching once again a YouTube video presentation of the University of Wyoming Center on Aging. I'm Scott Veach. I'm your host, and on this program we'll be discussing topics of interest for caregivers of loved ones with dementia. We hope that you will subscribe to the channel and you'll hit that thumbs up like button. Both of those actions help the channel to grow and allow us to reach more people. And if you'll tap that notification bell, you'll be alerted each time we upload a new program. And now, this is Once Again. My guest today is Dr. Kyle Page. If you were with us for part one that posted a couple of weeks ago, we are glad to have you back with us here for part two. He has a doctorate in psychology with an emphasis on aging and mental health from the University of North Texas. He specializes in geriatric mental health, and he is passionate about improving the care of older adults. Thanks so much for being back with us for part two.
Thanks for having me.
One of the things I want to do is actually go back and review briefly some of the things that you mentioned in part one. The changes and behavior and mood are common and are expressed in many ways. You said that the different causes of dementia can produce different types of behavior change, at least in the beginning years, and those become more acute as the illness progresses, and that adapting our communication style is one way to help us interact best with someone who is living with dementia. And I also want to mention some of the things that you provided too, as far as reassurances for the caregiver, and that is that learning what works takes time and practice. Boy, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint, right?
Oh yeah, it's a long game that you're kind of playing to make someone else feel reassured, to feel comfortable, to feel safe, and then for you trying to navigate all of this as well.
And you also said that there are going to be good days and bad days for all involved.
All involved, and I very specifically talked about all involved. Because of all the changes that are happening when someone has dementia, whether that's behavior, it's communication abilities, physically how they're doing, they all are going to interact in their own ways. And just like anyone else without dementia, there will be good days and there will be not so good days. And it's just recognizing that that kind of like variation still happens. It will continue to still happen even though somebody has dementia. It may be several years in, but all involved will have good days and bad days.
And I think too, we talk about the person with dementia. Caregiving is such a difficult task. One thing you said that I think is important to stress is that your message to the caregiver is, you're a good person. You're trying your best. Would you elaborate on that? Because I think that is like the $1 million point to stress.
Yeah, when we were just talking about that long ago, when we start getting into what can I do as a friend, as a family member, as a loved one to help someone with dementia, people start learning about the behavior changes that happen and strategies that we can try. And very commonly, what I encounter when I speak to individuals over the years is that they say, oh, I wish I knew this sooner. I had no idea. I wish somebody would have told me. And you can kind of hear there's a part in there where they start feeling bad that maybe they didn't know enough or try enough to help someone with dementia who was in distress. But it's important very early on to kind of spread this message that you are doing your best, you are trying your best, you are a good, as you said, like you are a good person. You're doing the best you can with what you know at that time through these goods and bad days. And even during times where it feels helpless or hopeless, that nothing I do seems to help, I always remind people you're still providing security. You're still providing reassurance. You're still providing companionship, love, pleasant conversations, a smile. You're still providing a lot more than what people tend to realize to help somebody with dementia.
We're actually taping this in September of 2023. And you spoke to our Wyoming Dementia Together group just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And in that talk, you mentioned 7 strategies to use in your daily interactions with someone who is living with dementia. And it's an acronym for the word CANDLES.
Yeah.
And the number one, the first one with the letter C, was communication.
Yeah, so some details on the communication. You'll have to go back and watch the part one to get
There's a
bit
good
more.
promo.
But yeah, right. But communication is so key that it kind of starts the list. That a lot of times when we're trying to figure out why someone with dementia might be upset, frustrated, and distressed, and what we can do, it's communication. That's what we have control over. We can't change the disease that's happening in the brain, but we can change how we interact and involve someone. So we say things like making sure you are facing the person directly, you're in front of them, you're being aware of your body language, the tone of your voice, because those things can still be picked up. Language may be lost, but communication doesn't end. And so we really focus on how are we communicating? Are we asking too much, talking too fast? Those are things that we encourage people to think about.
In part one of this, you also talked about the tone that we use. And I hadn't really thought about that before, but I can see where that would really play into it. Maybe the person can't figure out the words, or process the words, but tone is a different matter.
It is. It's another way that we communicate with each other. In part one, we talked about a vocabulary list that can be quite small. You'll have to watch part one, but this is just, let's say, 5 words or so. And if I communicate to this person and I don't use words that are on that list, the message is not going to come across through the words, but I could still get it across with my tone, my facial expression, my body language. And so this is where we say you will have good days and bad days, and you're still a good person. You're going to run into times when you're stressed, you're frustrated, you're pressed for time, and your tone may not exactly match what you're really trying to communicate with someone. But it's a often overlooked point of communication that we try to teach people in their strategies.
So C is communication, A is approach.
Yeah. So approach, we think of like physical approach. So not only do we want to be thinking about verbally kind of how we're interacting, but also physically. We said some of that with the body language because that is part of communication. But in a very real way, we talk about making sure that if I'm physically interacting, I'm doing something with someone or for someone with dementia, that again, we don't go too fast, that we don't ask them to do something that's too complex or multiple steps at once. We want to break the task down into something that's simpler, something that's more manageable, something perhaps that's easier done. So for example, if we were to ask someone just to get dressed, it sounds pretty straightforward, but to someone with dementia several years in, that's a lot. That's a lot to ask someone. So we might break that physical approach down with just questions like, lift your arms so that we can have a shirt come off, or take shirt off before I ask them to change their pants or their socks or something like that. So we're trying to break the steps down into smaller chunks, have them do that before we move on to the next task.
You mentioned something also that I really hadn't thought about before. Notice their body language. What can we learn from their body language?
So again, like they are going to be communicating with us nonstop, just like we are with them. And they might not say exactly what they're thinking or feeling because they have words that they have lost and they've only got a few left to pick from. And so we might be spending more time, more emphasis on the body language of that individual where we're trying to understand what's going on. So you might see a facial expression, you might see someone turn away, you might someone pull back their hand a little bit, and those are all messages of them communicating something to us beyond the words that we still want to be paying attention and probably more attention to as time goes on.
So C is communication, A is approach, and N is needs. They have needs.
They have needs. You don't lose having needs, whether that's physical needs, spiritual needs, social needs, psychological needs. None of that changes as far as needing those things when you have dementia. What gets harder is you communicating that you want those things or you need those things or you can't access those things as easily. Or it changes how easily they can kind of meet their need for hunger, for example. They can't perhaps, or they struggle quite a bit to kind of get up from the couch to find the kitchen, to find the food, to open the package, to prepare the food. That's a lot of steps that they might not be able to do anymore. So they might have a need for hunger, but they can't address it on their own. And so we're looking that when they seem upset or they seem frustrated or distressed, is there some need perhaps that needs to be addressed? It could be something as needing to go to the restroom. It could be something that they're cold or too hot. It could also be that they're just bored and they want to interact with someone. They want to have some kind of companionship, perhaps. Those are all needs that don't go away when somebody has dementia.
So again, it's almost like reading their body language again.
Mm-hmm. Very
Okay.
much.
So C is communication, A is approach, N is needs, D is distraction. And I'm kind of wondering, that sort of sounds to me like in distraction, redirection. Is that another word for it?
Yeah, there's a couple words that people might use to mean pretty much the same thing or something close to it. And so a lot of times when someone with dementia perhaps gets really focused on something, or they get, perhaps they're focused on getting out of the house, finding the car keys to drive that car, or they get really anxious and worried and they're just asking the same question over and over again. Um, you hear these things or you see it online or you're reading a book somewhere and they say distract them or redirect them to another task. And it's much easier said than done, but we have some kind of core kind of things that we ask people to focus on. What we want to try to avoid as much as possible, that let's say someone is at that door and they're trying to figure out how to open it, to go outside. And we don't want them to go outside because perhaps it's midnight or something. It's really hard when someone with dementia is standing at that door and they're focused on getting a task done. They really want to get something done because they're trying to meet a need, perhaps, to feel productive, to go to work or something. If you just walk up and say, you know what, it's bedtime, actually, let's go to bed. Why aren't you sleeping? It's attempt to redirect, and that's a helpful thing to try to do, but they're still focused on going to work. And so when you're trying to redirect or distract someone, we always encourage you to somehow get their attention. Somehow let them know that you're kind of where they're at the moment. You say their name, perhaps you give a gentle touch on the shoulder if that's something they're comfortable with. You maybe say something about, oh, where are you trying to go? And you have some quick little conversation about it. That way they know you're trying to help them, or at least you're kind of in the same place that they're at that moment. And then what we encourage people to do is find some kind of half step away from whatever it is that they're focused on. We don't want to completely offer a different suggestion like TV or playing cards or something, because their mind is still stuck on wanting to do something else. And so they're talking about going to work and it's midnight and you say, you've always been a really good worker. You've always been really dedicated to what you do, right? I'm listening, I'm with you, I hear what you're trying to say, and then you find a related topic. One of the things you were helping me with was over here in the kitchen. I don't think we ever got a chance to finish that together yet, and I had a question about it, right? And you're trying to slowly kind of redirect them towards something else. And then you can do a different activity, or at least try to do a different activity. I always say, it doesn't always work, of course, but it's one of these strategies we want to look at, we want to try. And the key point is don't just walk up to someone and offer a completely different activity. You kind of have to do a half step first.
So C is communication, A is approach, N is needs, D is distraction. I love L. L is leave it for later. Not everything has to be a front burner issue, does it?
Not everything has to be, and gosh, not everything can, right?
Right, yeah.
Issue. This is where you'll hear people say, pick your battles, choose your battles. There's a lot to be done when you're helping someone, whether it's appointments, the medications, just housework that's still being kept up as someone is there with dementia. And it's always getting people to kind of think again, if this has to be done right now, this shirt that needs to be changed, this shower that needs to happen, this pill that needs to be given, sometimes it might be more worthwhile in avoiding more conflict or escalating a conflict to wait 30 minutes, an hour, half a day, depending on what we're talking about, maybe even a day or two. And so it gets real, it's real understandable that when there's a lot to be done, we get pretty laser focused and we think of our checklist that we're trying to address and get lots of things done before we move on to the next thing. But we just want to encourage people just to be a bit thinking, a bit more open to, is it something that needs to be done? Is it a pick your battle type of situation that you can try again later in a few minutes, or perhaps involving some other family member to help you out later?
C is communication, A is approach, N is needs, D is distraction, L is leave it for later, E is environment. I got to be aware of everything that's around us.
Right? And this really is the surroundings of the individual. When we look at what can cause somebody with dementia to be distressed, to be frustrated, to be overwhelmed, a lot of times, perhaps more so than what people realize, it can be the surroundings that they're in. And this can literally mean them sitting in a chair in the living room and seeing if the TV is up too loud, seeing if the air conditioner is blowing right on their face. And so they're a bit too cold, but they don't know how to problem solve getting warmer. It could be there's a group of family visiting for dinner and there's too many people talking and they can't figure out which one to follow. And then they get frustrated, right? So many things in the immediate surroundings of the individual can actually play into some of this distress that someone might feel. And so this is where we become the detectives. And kind of like with needs and then kind of reading body language, you're trying to look around the environment and see, is there something here that's making it unpleasant for someone with dementia? We all can handle stress to different degrees, but no matter how well you did before dementia, your stress level, your tolerance for stress is going to be much lower as each year with dementia goes by. So it doesn't take very much to make someone upset or overwhelmed. And sometimes it's hard for us to see because we would say, oh, the TV's not that loud. It's not bothering me,
Yeah.
but it could bother somebody else with dementia.
And finally, S with senses, sort of ties everything in together.
Yeah, right? Yeah, senses and kind of sensory functioning to the extent possible. We know we want to encourage people who have glasses to wear their glasses, people who have hearing aids to wear their hearing aids. If they're in a room and it's daytime, to have lights on as much as people can tolerate that, because these all help our senses function better. It gives your brain the best chance to understand that someone is standing in front of me, or that's a jacket hanging over there, not a person standing in the corner. It gives me the best chance to hear what you're saying so that I can try to remember it perhaps, or keep track of the conversation. We want to promote sensory functioning as much as possible. And one of the tidbits that we shared is that a lot of the hallucinations or these things that people see, animals, people standing in the corner, can be reduced with more light, wearing your glasses and having more light on during the daytime. So little things that we can try to help out for everyone involved.
We have covered a lot in the two parts that we have had with Dr. Kyle Page, who is a doctorate in psychology, emphasis on aging and mental health from the University of Texas. This is actually our third show together. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And also, we want to remind you that part one of this two-part interview has already been posted. We invite you to check that out as well. You've been watching once again a YouTube video presentation of the University of Wyoming Center on Aging. We hope, if you haven't done so already, that you'll subscribe to the channel and hit that thumbs up like button. Both of those actions help the channel to grow and allow us to reach more people. And if you'll tap that notification bell, you'll be alerted each time we upload a new video. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm Scott Veach. We'll see you again next time.